Hey, and welcome to the predictions video for Week 14. Um, all of the games I have for this video, there's only 6 of them for this video, but I'm going to do a lot of talking about them because all of them have either major bowl implications or playoff implications. So we're going to start with, and they're all still ranked games. Pardon me. We're going to start with number 22 Temple at number 19 Houston. Now the Ets in this aren't except for one of them, are not a actually home game for the other team. It's just they're ranked higher. In this one, I have Temple beating Houston. The reason I have this is I think Temple's defense is really the real deal this season. I mean, you look at the defenses, the offenses that this team has played, and they've handled most of them really well. Notre Dame is one of the better offenses out there to play against. They put up 36 points on Stanford just last weekend. It's a team that's not easy to hold back, and Temple did a really good job. They lost that game, but they did a really good job of holding on to that defense, that offense, and causing turnovers. But I think Temple's defense is really, really good, and I think that they will give Houston a lot to handle. I think they can win. However, Houston is not entirely out of this game. Houston is a really good team. They're only a one-loss team. They had that one hiccup against UConn, and they lost that game. But otherwise, they've been solid. They could be undefeated at this point. But I think Temple wins that, and that is the AAC championship game. Next on the list is the only game that is not a conference championship game, has no conference championship implications at all, but it does potentially have a major bowl game bid implications. It is Texas at number 12, Baylor. I have Baylor winning the game. I think Texas is full of surprises, but I don't think they're full of enough surprises to pull off the win against Baylor. Baylor, if they win this, they have a chance at a major bowl game, depending on what the committee thinks of them. They did lose to TCU, and they would have the same record as TCU, which could mean they could potentially put TCU into a major bowl game as opposed to Baylor. But it still has, if Baylor has to win to even be in that argument. Next, I have the SEC championship game, which is number 18 Florida and number 2 Alabama. Now, this game is interesting. This one has playoff implications, obviously. If Alabama wins the game, they are in. There's no way that the SEC champion with one loss, who's currently ranked number 2, is not making the playoffs if they win. However, if Florida wins the game, I'm almost certain the SEC would be left out of the playoffs entirely. Florida is number 18 currently, and at 2 losses, and those losses to LSU and Florida State, I don't think they could jump high enough in the rankings. It would definitely be a major bowl implication for them. They would definitely move up into the top 10. But I can't see them moving 14 spots to get to number 4 at the very least. I don't see that happening. However, on another note, I don't see Florida winning the game at all. I don't think they have a chance at this one. I got to go with Alabama. Next is number 20, USC at number 7, Stanford, the Pac-12 championship. Now, this game's interesting because earlier in the season, it was, I think, week 3, Stanford played USC at USC and beat them by 10 points, 41-31 in a shootout. Now, second half defense helped Stanford win that game. So the Pac-12, for the second year in a row, is a rematch of 2 teams that played. Now, if you remember last year, Arizona beat Oregon in the regular season. And then in the Pac-12 championship, Oregon beat Arizona to win the championship. So watch out for USC. I'm picking Stanford to win. I think Stanford's just got slightly better team. But USC's offense is potent, and they will score. So it's going to be another shootout, and I kind of think that the edge goes to Stanford in this one. That being said, watch out for USC. They could pull off the quote-unquote upset and win the Pac-12. Now, the playoff implications in this one, there are playoff implications, surprisingly, for a lot of this. Stanford is a 2-loss team. If they win the Pac-12 championship, they will be 11-2. They are currently number 7. If Alabama loses to Florida, then that opens up a free spot up in the top 12. But up in the top 4, I mean. I don't know where I got 12. So that opens up a free spot up in the top 4. Now, if Michigan State loses to Iowa, that puts it at Iowa undefeated. They would most likely move up to number 2, most likely jump Oklahoma with that kind of a win at the end of the season to remain 13-0. If Clemson wins, that's 1 and 2 are Clemson and Iowa. So that means that we have a Stanford team at 2 losses who is conference champion. They could take that 4th spot. And if they take that 4th spot, they would have to jump Ohio State. Now, the reason I think they would jump Ohio State is because they played in their conference championship and won it. So even though they're 2 losses and Ohio State's only 1, Stanford has a conference championship and a stronger strength of schedule than Ohio State. So I think that the committee might give them the nod to go up into that 4th spot ahead of Ohio State. Plus, Michigan State, who lost the Big 12, the Big 10, would have beaten Ohio State. So that might be enough to hold Ohio State back, emptying that free spot for Stanford to take it. So that's the playoff scenario for Stanford to get in. USC has potential to beat Stanford. They could try and get up higher in the rankings to maybe spoil for a bigger bowl game. But I think it's going to be a close one to watch. USC really wants this conference championship too, though. So it's going to be a close, exciting game. Keep an eye on it. Next, I have number 5 Michigan State at number 4 Iowa. Now this one has obvious playoff implications. The winner is in. Like, there's no way the winner of this game is not in the top 4. I have picked Michigan State, but that's a tentative pick. Like, when I say tentative pick, I mean I went back and forth on this one a lot because Michigan State's played close games all season long except for last week against Penn State. Almost every single game Michigan State has played this season has been a last-second win or just a really close game. Except for the Nebraska loss, which was still a really close game, but it was a loss. Iowa has done a similar thing. A few games where they pulled way ahead, but they've for all intents and purposes played really close games, and in some of them they shouldn't have been close games. They should have run away with it. So I think I gave the edge to Michigan State because they have been consistently good for the last few years. Whereas Iowa, this is their rise. This is their sudden emergence into the spotlight. I don't know how well they're going to react to it. I think they'll play a great game. They're going to play a great defensive game. This should be, in my opinion, a low-scoring game. Neither team... Michigan State's been high on their defense for most of the season. Some games here and there where they played awful, but for all intents and purposes, Michigan State's defense has been strong. Iowa relies on their defense hard to win games. So I think this is going to be a defensive struggle, and I give the edge slightly to Michigan State because they have a better offense than Iowa. Now, the last game on my list... that one is number 10 North Carolina at number 1 Clemson. This one is going to be crazy. North Carolina can score. They've got a potent offense. So does Clemson. So I see this one also being a shootout between these two teams. I'm giving the edge to Clemson just because I think they have played some pretty good football all season long. And North Carolina, they've gone up and down in some games. Like, they've been high most of the season, and then towards the end they started doing this like wavering thing, and they had that bad game against Virginia Tech, which they still won, but it wasn't all that good. Um, honestly, it could go either way. I'm picking Clemson because I just think Clemson slightly has a slight advantage just for offensive power. North Carolina, though, the implications in this game are playoffs for both teams. It's one of the two championship games that have playoff implications for both teams. If Clemson wins, it's obvious they're going in. They'll be number one. They'll stay undefeated. They're going to go into the playoffs. If North Carolina wins, they are number 10, but they would be a one-loss team with a win over number 1 in the nation. If that's not enough to sneak them into the number 4 spot, I don't know what is. Like that to me says that North Carolina has what it takes to play with the big guys. They just beat number 1. They're the only team to beat Clemson at that point. So I honestly think that North Carolina would have a major case for making it in at that point. So that's the games. There's only 6 of them this week with ranked opponents, but if it all goes the way I've predicted it to, that means that the top 4 would consist of Clemson at number 1. Alabama would most likely stay at number 2. If Michigan State wins, I think that Oklahoma will stay at number 3, and Michigan State would take the 4th position. So that lays up 1 through 4. 1 and 4 play, 2 and 3 play. So that would set up a game again between Clemson and Michigan State, and who else? Alabama and Oklahoma. So with that, we'll start with the Michigan State-Clemson game. I really think Clemson has a big edge in that. I think their offense is too potent for Michigan State. That being said, Michigan State has been the team that just finds ways to win. So it could be an exciting game, but I'm giving the edge to Clemson. I think they would move on to the national title. With that matchup between Oklahoma and Alabama, Oklahoma would look to get to a fast start, and I think they could. Alabama's defense hasn't been as strong as it was in the last few years under Saban, but it's still a good defense. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying it's not the shutdown defense that it has been. Now that being said, I think that Alabama would lose to Oklahoma. Not that their offense couldn't keep up, but it would be a shootout. And Alabama has not done well in shootouts in recent history. They lost to Ohio State in a shootout last season in the playoffs. They lost to Ole Miss at the start of this season in a shootout. So shootouts haven't been kind to Alabama, and I think that would give Oklahoma a slight edge over them, and they'd come out on top. So that sets up, in my predictions, a Clemson-Oklahoma national title. Now, that game would be a national title I want to see, because I get the impression between those two teams that scoring is going to happen. Oklahoma's been playing score all season. So has Clemson. They've had very few games where it's been low scoring and close. However, in those low scoring close games, Clemson has come out on top. So I gotta give the edge to Clemson in that national title. So if all things go the way I predicted, I think Clemson's going to be national champs. I think they're going to bring it back to the ACC. So it's really interesting to see all this, and I find it entertaining that last season, this is almost a non sequitur, but that last season we talked about how bad the Big Ten is, and yet now they're going to put a team in the playoffs 2 years in a row. So it just goes to show that when sportscasters say that a conference isn't as good as they used to be, they may be speaking too soon. But thanks for tuning in. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to do this quick. If you like the video, click the like button and subscribe, and I'll be back with you next week with a recap. See you later.